Good evening, dear participants. Welcome to the open webinar on post-COVID-19 business scenario. We at Birla Global University hope that you all are fine and safe. Now it's time to knock down the lockdown, and boosting the business is one of the ways we can do that. Thus, Birla Global University brings in a discussion on post-COVID-19 business scenario involving an illustrious panel. I'm Sadanand Meher. I have the privilege to introduce the with Tata Steel in various capacities since 1988. He has also worked as the Vice President of Indian Institute of Mineral Engineers and has published papers in their Journal of National Repute. Welcome, sir. Dr. Arvind Sahai is a doctorate from University of Texas, PGDM from IIM Ahmedabad, and BTech from IIT Kanpur. He is a professor and chairperson of marketing area at IIM Ahmedabad. He taught at London Business School before joining IIM Ahmedabad. Professor Sahai is currently on the boards of Brandscapes Consultancy Private Limited, GNFC, HIL, and IFCI Limited. He has worked with the Department of Economic Affairs, Ministry of Finance, and Niti Aayog, Government of India. He has published more than 50 cases in leading international journals. He has done corporate training for more than 50 clients in India and abroad. Welcome, sir. Dr. Gerald Gogwangan is the Dean, Faculty Business, Multimedia University, Malaysia. His research interests are in knowledge management, information system, environmental sustainability, and business management. He has been involved in higher education administration and management for over 20 years in MMU and other tertiary institutions. He has published extensively in his area of interest. Welcome to the panel, sir. Dr. Prasant Kumar Hota is the President and Group Head, Sustainability, CSR and Education, and Head of Odisha Corporate Communication, Jindal Steel and Power Limited. He has wide field exposures in India, Thailand, and Europe. In his 22 years of experience with NABARD, he contributed to several policy-making initiatives and to multi-dimensional development projects in the states of Maharashtra, Odisha, Gujarat, Rajasthan, UP, and Karnataka. Welcome, sir. The moderator of this session, Dr. Parameshwar Naik, is the Dean, Birla School of Management, Birla Global University. Dr. Naik, an alumnus of Delhi University, is an ardent professor in HRM, an academic administrator, a corporate trainer, a management consultant. He has about 31 years of experience in India and overseas, including 19 years in leadership positions like Dean and Director at several institutions across the country. He has 300 training and MDPs and 23 research projects to his credit. He has published 2 books and 29 research papers in journals of repute. Welcome everybody. Over to Dr. Naik.
Good evening. Very esteemed members of the panel, very distinguished panel. I just check the mic. Am I audible to all of you?
Loud and clear.
Yeah, you are.
Yeah. Okay. Good evening and welcome to this webinar. And I am really overwhelmed and very satisfied with the kind of participation of so many people. About 1,000 in my computer is showing 1,001 registration, and so far 334 now have joined this webinar. Welcome everybody, and I also expect others to join subsequently. We have another member of the panel, Mr. Arun Misra, the Deputy CEO of the Hindustan Zinc Limited. He is maybe busy in a board meeting extended, and he will be joining shortly. And let me just take a few minutes just to give my opening remark, and then briefly clarify some of the points, how we are going to conduct this session, which may be useful for managing time and also discussing on certain issues in detail and also something brief. So, friends, all of you know that we are in a downtime due to COVID-19 pandemic. This particular pandemic situation has really created havoc and a kind of xenophobia and the kind of human kind of tragedy that has caused a social and economic kind of crisis that is unprecedented, and mental health hazards affecting hundreds of thousands of people all over the world. The tiny virus seems to be very smart and very powerful, even maybe very more powerful than the warriors of world wars, which has not only infected millions of people but also affected millions of business enterprises globally. It has altered the business landscape of the world. The impact has been in almost all sectors of business. The pandemic situation is probably going to be quite volatile and dynamic. It has not only created unprecedented economic challenges, extraordinary impact on public health, but also many challenges for safeguarding the lives and livelihoods. The prolonged lockdowns to contain the spread of this virus have serious impact on almost all sectors of economy, maybe except a few pharmaceutical companies. There is uncertainty everywhere, and particularly in the reopening of the business. There is a constant fear of losing job, and there is a possibility that many people will not get jobs. So the future is very uncertain. So in such circumstances, what should we do? Should we allow the future of business to be decided in future, or we should prepare our business managers to manage well the uncertain future of business? The crisis situation really calls for a strategic actions for finding the pathways to manage the new normalcy, which is these days a new term has come up, the post-COVID. That post-COVID is quite uncertain, because when COVID is going to go out of our life, it is very uncertain. Therefore, there is a new term many people are using, is called new normalcy. Whenever there will be a new normalcy, how to manage the business, what will be the challenges. So with this, in this backdrop, today's webinar aims at deliberating on several issues and challenges facing different sectors of business due to COVID-19 pandemic, and also predict what would be the business scenario in post-COVID era and suggest some ways to manage the challenges for business success in new normal situation. So how to structure this discussion for our panel members and all participants? As we have very limited time, I would request all members to be very precise when they will put forth their views and also insights. So I suggest that we will have in this entire discussion in two parts. One is discussion by the panel members, and the second part will be the Q&A, the question and answer session. So we are dividing the time about say 30 to 40, 35 minutes for our discussion, and then Q&A about 15 minutes, and then summarizing the things. So in the first, all our panel members to spend about 4 to 5 minutes each member to discussion of what now and what next. What now means what are the implications of COVID-19 on various sectors of business, and what next means what will post-COVID-19 business look like, what will be the probable business strategies for large public sector, private sector, SMEs, unorganized sectors, both globally and particularly in India, for their survival and growth. In the second round, I would request them to also to find out, what will be the new roles of the leaders and managers, and what competency need to be developed to manage the post-COVID pandemic business. How should management education, particularly in India, and the higher education in general across the globe, to be reoriented to develop such leadership qualities and managerial competencies? So this will be, I think, the broadly the points where my request is to all panel members, very distinguished panel, to discussion both in the context of global, Asian, and Indian context as far as possible. So with this, as kind of a brief note, I welcome all of you once again, and I request my panel members to start the discussion. So to start with, I request Professor Arvind Sahai, who is a very accomplished, very eminent professor, very widely traveled, widely consulted professor in our very reputed, the pride of India management school, IIM Ahmedabad. I welcome you, sir. I request you to throw some light on the first aspect, like what are the business implications in COVID and post-COVID situations, and what are the strategies and new ways that to address that, particularly in that, and to also address to some extent of the digital divide that is created, and how to manage the digital era when all companies are not well equipped to be digital, very efficient. Looking at large companies, the SMEs particularly, and in India, the unorganized sector, which contributes about 50% to the GDP in India. How to address to such issues if COVID will remain with us? We have to live with COVID. And similar situations of lockdown or similar kind of situation will prevail for long. How to address to these issues? Over to Professor Sai.
Thank you, Dr. Naik. So let me start by saying that we can expect a fairly large GDP contraction the world over, including in India. I think Goldman Sachs 3 days ago predicted that India would have a GDP contraction of about 5%. 1 month ago at Ahmedabad, we had kind of said that our best case scenario is a 3% contraction. Base case is between 6 to 9%, and worst case might be above 15% contraction, depending on what we do between now and the end of the fiscal year, which is March 2021. So our GDP is going to contract quite substantially, even though the IMF as recently as a month ago, I think, or less than a month ago, is saying that we will grow at 1.9%. I don't think that's correct. I don't know what they are smoking. We are going to have a fairly severe contraction. The only other parallel that I can draw is 1979, when our agriculture contracted by around 20%. When we had that drought in 1979, and the GDP contracted by about 3 or 4%. So first time in about 40 years that the GDP is going to contract. Now the second question, therefore, which immediately follows from the first is, okay, so where is that contraction going to come from? The contraction, I think, very clearly sectors like airlines, hospitality, tourism, restaurants, multiplexes, malls, those kind of retails are going to have a fairly large degree of contraction. Maybe 30% contraction is quite possible. Where will there be expansion? So you can expect expansion in pharmaceuticals and telecom services, in online training and education, in virtual reality, augmented reality. Our software business should still be okay. Not expand too much, but it should be okay. Two-wheelers should actually expand. There's a reasonable chance that two-wheelers will expand. Construction might struggle a bit, but should not be too much of a downturn, provided, and this is a big if, the labor which has moved away from the sites and gone back to their homes in various parts of the country, we are able to get them back in a reasonable time frame. So there's going to be contraction all over in different sectors. Maybe a few sectors will expand. What does that mean for policy makers, and especially what does that mean for managers? The first thing for managers, I think that I have been telling people, the companies that I work with, is that we need to be conserving cash. Be very careful with cash. There is one company that has been in a fortunate situation of maintaining good relationships with its suppliers and customers. So it had actually given some advance to its suppliers, and the suppliers were quite happy to give back that advance to help the cash flow statement. The other thing that I see companies doing is that led by the top management, a lot of companies are taking pay cuts. So HIL, for example, the top management is taking a pay cut of 20%, and anyone earning more than 15 lakhs a year is taking a pay cut of 10%. There's a consumer electronics retailer that I'm working with where the promoters, this is a 500 crore company where the promoters are taking no salary for the year, and the shop floor, the retail store workers are not taking a pay cut, but the managers are taking a pay cut of around 30%. So we can expect that to happen quite a bit in an effort to conserve cash. Of course, there are some companies which have actually increased salaries: Asian Paints, Cognizant, Capgemini, Vardhaman Special Steel, Vardhaman Textiles, Vardhaman Special Steel. They have actually either maintained or increased salaries. So that is also happening. Going forward, the key to remember that we have to use this as an opportunity. This is a crisis which is probably larger than the 1991 crisis, when we had our backs to the wall, and that allowed us to open up the economy and move away from the earlier socialist pattern of economy. This is another crisis where some good policy initiatives can lead to a fairly large jump over the next 3, 4, 5 years. Already the policy initiatives in agriculture should be really helpful to expand the sector quite considerably. The removal of cross-state movement of produce, agricultural produce, the removal of APMC, Agricultural Product Markets Committee, is a very significant step. The liquidity measures by the government to make sure that the money, cash is available to companies, especially MSMEs, the micro, small and medium scale enterprises that need the money, that should be available. That is also a good step. Having said that, the RBI and the government will need to push the public sector banks a little bit more, because especially the public sector banks, which have around 70% of the credit in the economy, they are still very, very reluctant to lend. They are still parking their money with the central bank, even though the reverse repo rate, the rate at which they deposit the money with the central bank, has actually been decreased quite substantially, down to 3.25%. Despite that, public sector banks especially are reluctant to lend. And the other part that we need to be careful about is our non-banking finance companies, which have been scaling back. We need to find a way to get them back into lending ways. So these are some of the factors that will be required. The good news, I think, is that in India, the case fatality rate, CFR, is actually quite low. Compared to most of the rest of the world. So right now, for example, you have around 3,200 deaths on a total cumulative cases of around 110,000. So that's less than 3% on reported cases. There is a Stanford University study which says that the actual number of cases are between 50 and 100 times the reported number of cases. So if you go by that yardstick, we actually have 5.5 million cases on which you have maybe 3,500 deaths. If there is some underreporting of deaths, if that's not 3,500, it's just 5,000, that's still like 0.01%. That's quite low. And if anything, I would argue that, we may have overreacted in some senses, and clearly it is now time to get back to normal. Lockdown 1 and lockdown 2 may have been warranted, but lockdown 3 and 4, we need to move on now, and move on quickly if we want to move forward as an economy. So let me pause there. I think I've already exceeded my quota of 4 minutes by at least 2 minutes. So I will stop there and let my co-panelists talk.
Yeah, thank you very much, Professor Sai. Very nicely said. Of course, I'm tempted to ask you something what you mentioned at at last, that I do not know how this our Prime Minister and others will react to that. Like if fertility rate is low, should any country take decision to limit the lockdown and just to have the prosperous business or business prosperity?
Emerging economies
Because
don't have a
really
choice.
what happened in US, and for political reasons and for the practical reasons, if whether that is going to happen anywhere.
Emerging economies don't have a choice. They have to open up, otherwise they will destroy their economies. Mexico has opened up from yesterday or day before, even though the cases are increasing over there much higher than India. India is actually stable. The percentage daily increases at around 5 to 5.5% for the last 10 days. And even in the last 4 days after lockdown 4, it has not increased. Of course, we will really get to see 14 days after May 17, when the period during that it takes to manifest itself gets over. But my sense is that it should not, the rate of new cases should not be that high, and the recovery has gone up because the fatalities are low, so we should be okay. Of course, we need to be careful, we need to practice physical distancing, we need to go out with masks, and so on and so forth. But we don't need to stop living just because there is this virus around. We have to remember that the bubonic plague in 1348 killed 1/3 of the population. In 1918, the Spanish flu pandemic killed 50 million out of the 500 million people who were infected. That's 1/3 of the people who were 1/10 of the people who were infected. Here it is like 1,000th. So really, I think we need to move on.
I think this is a kind of very critical decision. Anyway, thank you very much, Professor Sai. Now I would like to know from Professor Gerald from Malaysia, the kind of perspectives that he carries with him. What is your take on the things that just we discussed? Do you think that a country can take decision to go without lockdowns just to see that the economy is not affected, the business prospers? And also, along with this, you can also throw your light on the subject that we discussed.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Prof. Naya. Basically, in Malaysia, I think we learned it relatively the hard way, because we had very low infection rates. We did not close our borders, and we were very, very careful with the travelers coming in from Wuhan and so on. But what happened was it just took one person from Korea to attend a mass event and create a massive infection in Malaysia. So within just a few weeks, within a week, what happened in Malaysia was our numbers were going up very, very rapidly. We were very concerned because at the rate that it was going, the health system could not cope with the infections and so on. So the government had to actually enforce a lockdown, and we have got numerous lockdowns. Okay, and our current lockdown will ease on the 9th of June. But what we have learned is that it's very, very important to embrace the new normalcy, like what you mentioned, in terms of social distancing, in the way how we operate. So what COVID has done to us is that it's required businesses and everybody to rethink how we conduct our business. How do we deliver our value chain? So like if we look now, most of the organizations are embracing digital technology, whether you like it or not. Okay, so we have got food delivery businesses sprouting everywhere, contactless delivery, all forms of e-payments, e-delivery models are being used now, and that actually helped a lot to ensure that people in Malaysia are still able to get the supplies. Okay, but like what Prof. Sahey mentioned, basically the economy is contracting, and the government, I think everybody is very, very concerned over the economic situation, and hence they are easing lockdown. So for the past 2 weeks in Malaysia, businesses are allowed to operate for most businesses, except for businesses which involve high contact like saloons and so on are not allowed to operate. But most business organizations are allowed to operate at 100%, provided they adhere to the SOPs. So we implemented this in early May. So we are looking at the infection rates up to now, and thankfully, our infection rates are still at the control and manageable level. But the government has been reminding all of us to make sure that we don't take things lightly, to ensure that we remain cautious and mindful. And in Malaysia, we can't move across borders. We can't move from one state to another state. So movement from states between states have been curtailed, and even for the Eid celebrations that we're going to have this weekend, people are not allowed to go back to their hometowns. So there are a lot of challenges, and I think it's a matter of having striking a good balance between business, the economy, and also the lives of people. Thank you, Prof.
That's good. That's yes, that's right. Thank you very much, Professor Gerald. What is your views that how this pandemic, this COVID pandemic, has really created an opportunity in Malaysia or in Asia, Asian countries, for international business? I mean, do you think that it is going to help?
I guess some sectors are experiencing a lot of growth. For example, like in Malaysia, we are producing lots of gloves, rubber gloves. Okay, so that has actually been a very, very lucrative sector. So all our factories that are producing PPEs are actually booming, and also it helps. The spillover effects are being seen in the air cargo, because it's being shipped all over the world. Also, another area that we are seeing a lot of business is in the manufacturing sector, in the semiconductor and so on, because we've got many factories that are producing components for ventilators and medical equipment. So these sectors have been operating since day one of lockdown, and that is helping to somewhat compensate our contraction. But again, we are anticipating that the economy will contract by around 2 to 3% in terms of GDP because of this. And the government can't afford to maintain a total lockdown, because for every day we are losing billions if the businesses are not operating. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Gerald. Now I will come to Dr. Hota, Prasant Hota, with a person who has really seen the corporate world and also seen the rural areas, being in NABARD for long. I would like you to throw some light on the same aspect, like how India is going to take the advantage, take the benefit of this crisis situation. And particularly, India has got the benefit of demographic dividend, having young people, and also there are opportunity that because of the China and India relationship, China-US relationship, how India is going to benefit from this crisis situation, and particularly, and referring to the Prime Minister's recent announcement and Government of India's, the kind of emphasis on self-reliance, the Atmanirbharshilata. Just referring to that, would you throw some light on this?
Thank you, Dr. Naik. Not only I am talking to this knowledgeable body, like the illustrious presence of Dr. Arvind Saha and Dr. Gerald, but also I am seeing the registration, the 363, which are mostly students. I can make out, since it is a university, there will be mostly students. So I just want to begin with something that see, when the civilization has grown, there could be several pandemics, there could be several upheavals in the growth of civilization. We are fortunate or unfortunate, that is something which we have to decide, that perhaps through our generation, this particular upheaval is we are going through. And maybe it is said that before dawn, there is a intense darkness. Maybe there is a better dawn awaiting outside. I will not repeat what Dr. Arvind Saha has told, that what are the area which are shrinking, but what are the area which are the possibilities. But I will just tell you, just think of the situation when the prehistoric man entered into a cage, when the tiger came or when the elephant came, that was the situation when the cage man was behaving. After that, they learned. They did not enter into the cage, they used fire, to scare away the animal. After that, they learned. They went to the hilltop and they threw the big stones. After that, they learned. They started constructing houses. Like that, the learning process, the same pandemics, the same upheavals, the same adversity, but the civilization learn. People learn. So this is a coping mechanism in which we are there. Maybe we learn better. We are better secure. It is a fact, as Dr. Arvind Saha has already said, that the worldwide, if you study the Chamber of Commerce, input, I have been studying for last 30 days or more than that. The revenue side, the revenue is shrinking. It's shrinking actually 20 to 25%, not a small amount. It's shrinking everywhere. And the international, the scenario is that the value network around the world that has been disrupted. These are the realities in which we all are today. 100 days before, the customer's appetite, the appetite to pay, all those things have changed. This has changed. This has already transformed. So how we really cope with the scenario? Since international, if you look at the international commerce has so far for last decades, it has depended on the Asia's output. But now the irony is very strong. Asia is itself struggling to find out the demand and find out the supply. Let us not rule out China. China. We all are aware that both from supply side and demand side, how critical is China. So the point is, this is, I will not call it a new normal. I will call it is a new day. It is a new learning rather. It's a new learning that how to restart the life. And while restarting the life, we have to take care of the existing and current resources, the kind of people, the intellectual property, the systems, the technology, the capital, and the disruptions which are around. Everything we have to take into account, and we have to reinvent ourselves now. This is the time that people tell that you don't have to reinvent a wheel. I am going to tell you here that let us reinvent the wheel. Nothing wrong in that. There is nothing called sacrosanct that we will not reinvent. We'll reinvent ourselves. We'll reinvent to the challenges. So the point is, what is the kind of disruption we are talking? See, there are two sets of people. There are two sets of people here. One is the group of the people who are calling the winners, like maybe the e-platform makers, the cloud computing, the online business, the e-commerce. These are the people which is void of pure human contacts. They are called the winners. But in my language, I will not call that the rest of the people are losers. No, they will also be the winners, provided they adopt the technology, they adopt the attitude to change their thinking, to change their investment. Because if you see the people who are winning, like the e-platform and all these online, the pure human contactless area, there if a business, if you make more investment, you are so-called entering into a red ocean. There are strong competitors who are there. But the areas like hospitality, the areas like the areas which are suffering, okay, they are keeping at the back of our mind that trillions of dollars has been lost. But still, we have to find out proper technology, proper disruption system, and proper adaptability, so that this is the area we have to just see that how much we have to invest and which way we will communicate. We have to see the segmentation of the customers, how we approach them. Let's understand one thing, that there is no substitute, the thinking, the local, vocal, all these things has been told, but there is no substitute of collaborations. Irrespective of physical collaborations or not, but there has to be a collaboration. Civilization has been a story of collaboration. How we collaborate, that's the way. So if you have time, I will tell you how to collaborate.
Thank you very much, Dr. Fatah. Just a brief, very short answer from you. How do you advise and also SME sector in India? They need to really reinvent the wheel, or they have to just go for renorming to be successful in the post-COVID kind of situation? Because SMEs are really very good sector to contribute to the create employment for our youth. So how do you suggest? How do they strategize to operate? And the government of India has got a lot of promotional measures for them. Just a brief, very short advice.
Yeah, so see, already we have the government has opened up the stimulus packages, which will enhance the UBI, the universal basic income and everything. There are new investment plan. Banking system is quite liberal on them. There has been moratoriums. There will be few fresh loans. The MSME, the definition of the MSME has been redefined. So there are a lot many packages, but the challenge is not only that. Actually, the challenge is not only capital. The challenge is the collaboration mode, the solutions, the digital solutions. See, that is why I'm telling they have to reinvent themselves, to go through the online platform, to go through the digital solutions, to approach the customers, to go for the disruptive technology. For that, capital is required. I understand for that capital is required. But one thing, Dr. Naik, let's look at that. We all, irrespective of IIM Ahmedabad or Jindal Steel and Power or the government of India, in our own interest, the basic survival of this economy, we all are dependent on the MSME. MSME not only in the employment sector, but also in the export sector, keeping the economy vibrant. We all have to support the large industries, the research, the technology. Everybody has support like we all have to support agriculture in the interest of the food security. For like that, in the similar vibrance, in the similar intensity, we have to support the MSME. This is a national call now. So that is why I'll just conclude with one line. That is why the migrant laborers who are working now or who are going back, we have to really think in that parlance whether they can be brought back or they have to again reinvent some of the wheel. That the transplantation of skills. We have to see that how much they can adopt themselves into the new ambience. Because as far as my analysis goes, they are not coming back immediately. So we have to think in that way.
Okay. Thank you very much. I think we completed our first round. I'll just have a brief second round of discussion for about maybe 7 minutes from now. Very quick. I request all panel members to give quick suggestions. What should be the new role of leaders, business leaders today and for future business, and what new competency you think they should acquire or develop, even if they are not, business is not going to reinvent any wheel, but even if reorientation will require a lot of special qualities and competencies. If at all you think they need to have, what are those? Just three quick. What will be the roles and what are the competencies, and what business school or any higher education institution should do? What new strategies, new reorientation they should try to have? Quick, Professor Sahai.
So this is an opportunity for the leaders and CEOs to actually reach out and reconnect with a whole bunch of people in their organization. So let me give you a few examples. The specialty steel company in Ludhiana, turnover around 1,200 crores. They supply to the tier 1 suppliers of auto OEMs. So they make steel for crankshafts and shock absorbers and so on. what the MD of that company has done is that first he said, I won't have any layoffs, your jobs are safe. Second, he is actually getting them to train for the future. He's signed a collaboration agreement with a Japanese steel company, and he's using this period to train the guys. And third, he is personally calling up people 3 or 4 levels down the chain. Normally, you deal with people who are 1 or 2 levels down the chain. You don't normally talk on a personal basis 3 or 4 levels down the chain. And so this guy is calling them up, finding out whether everything is okay, making sure that they are getting their salaries and they are taking care, maintaining the physical distancing, maintaining their health, doing some exercise, even if it is at home and so on. And so for that reason, now when the lockdown, as the lockdown now releases, they have started production now 20% this month. In Ludhiana, probably they will become the employer of choice. Everybody else is either cutting back or reducing salaries. This guy is maintaining salaries, assuring the job, and reaching out individually when the MD of the company calls up a shop floor supervisor. That makes a difference. So this is an opportunity to actually build your organization, to reach out, to build your own brand in many ways. I've just started an assignment with a company that supplies battery components and batteries, how to improve their brand during taking advantage of the fact that nobody else is doing it. Why not try and do something? So this is a time when you will separate the men from the boys. The true leaders will come out and strengthen their companies immeasurably. The second part of your observation on the role of higher education institutions, I think what we are doing just now is part of what we should be doing, which is to very quickly disseminate these kinds of information as widely as possible on platforms like this. The other part of the adjustment is going forward, what will happen, and whether we can continue in business as usual when the campus reopens in July. I don't know what your schedules are, Dr. Gerald and Dr. Nayak, but we are planning to reopen in July. Now, what happens
Well,
if
we are also planning
at that time again there is another big wave and there's another lockdown, and so what do you do? So you have to plan for those contingencies and make sure that your students are on board and kept informed, and you have to communicate. I think, and this is the time when you need to be communicating probably 3 or 4 times the normal amount of communication that you do, as
Yes.
much as you can, so that everyone is carrying along. And clearly, one way or the other, more of education will move online. Though there will always be a place for our conventional in-class, face-to-face kind of an interaction-based teaching, but a reasonable amount we can expect to move online. We are already seeing that happening. Our blended learning programs are getting a lot of traction just now as we speak.
Yes, yes. Thank you. Thank you, Professor Sai. I would request Professor Gerald to just again throw some kind of light on this same question and share your views on this. What will be the new role of leaders and managers in the post-COVID era, and how to develop those the new qualities or competencies in them, if at all it will be required. Very quick, 3 points from you. I think you are not unmuted.
Basically, they need to seize the opportunity to ensure that they are able to repurpose their organization, to retrain and to refit their staff, to ensure that they are able to be transformed and prepared to embrace the changes brought about by this pandemic. And also in terms of universities will need to deploy online material. And like what Prof. Sahir mentioned, there is a need to ensure that communication is done properly. And despite the fact that a lot of classes will go online, like for example, in our university, will be going online until April next year. So what happens is that we need to ensure that we still maintain that personal touch. So that personal touch has to be maintained in an online form, because it's not only delivering lectures, playing, talking to the classes, but it's also having that counseling and pastoral care, which is very important in education. So I think that's all for now, Prof.
Thank you, Dr. Hota. Very specifically, I would like to know from you three new competencies that you think that your team, your people in the top and maybe at the middle level executives, what new quality, new competency you want to develop to face the new challenges? They can manage the business successfully.
Right now, we have to focus on the what we call is the DRBC, disaster recovery and business continuity. So that is something which we all have to do it. Many have started doing, and many are already on the job. And there is another third group of people who are doing it without knowing that this is their disaster recovery plan, and they are doing it very well. For example,
Okay.
let me talk of my company. You'll happy to know, Jindal Steel and Power is running on its full capacity. Be it its plant in Odisha, be it its plant in Bodbil, be it in two plants in Odisha, one pellet and another steel, and in Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, all the plants are running in full capacity, irrespective of the domestic demand. We have taken clue from the steel ministry, and we are surviving. Our turnover is based on the export market. Okay, we all understand that export market there is not much margin, but you can all appreciate that when there are blast furnace, when there is DRI route, we are both in DRI route and blast furnace route. So those things cannot be, those business cannot be put off. Okay, that business that cannot be stopped or paused. That business has to continue. Plants are to run. So what we have done is that we have tried to garner orders from the export market where margin is thin, but the turnover continues. Okay, so that is something we have a single principle. Whatever we get the demand, that much we produce, and number two, whatever we produce, we sell. So here maybe margin is less, but the sale is continuing. That is our number one thing. Number two is that disaster recovery, and this thing is the cloud service collaborations, because the cloud service collaboration is not only data, it also provides you the gateway for payment. Access to the export market, the payment should not be delayed because we need turnover. So another thing what we have done is that our inventory cycle we have reduced, because as you know, Dr. Saha has already told that cash is these days cash is the king. So we have to manage that. The inventory cycle we have reduced, so that once we are getting the order, almost with a weekly inventory, we are able to continue. Third is that what should be done. I'm not talking of my company here. What we should be done. India is getting knocks, from all over the world for chemical, for fertilizer, for pesticides, for textiles, for ceramic. These are the area for the furnitures. These are the area where India is getting knocks from the international community that if India can supply. So India has to prove its cost leadership and quality leadership here. These are the fantastic areas which are really emerging. Okay, so to do all these things in the manufacturing system, where we do the manufacturing, we have to maintain all those tools, whatever social distancing, pure human contact is, and a more digital platform. All those things we have to do so that these new markets, which India was playing in the second line, third line, fourth line, or eighth line, that India will catch it. For example, textile. I'm sure the way the trend is, India will become number one in textiles.
Yes.
I'm not really talking China is our competitor, but I am telling the preference for India is emerging more and more now because of the cost leadership and the quality leadership.
Okay, Dr. Hota, thank you very much. Due to paucity of time, I will be just closing the discussion part here, and I will take some few questions. There are a number of questions, of course. What I have done, I have clubbed some of the many questions to frame it one. And first, I asked a few questions which some of the participants have asked to me to address to few. I mean, only a particular panel member. Therefore, I'm asking this question to Professor Arvind Sahai. The question is, the question are from many people, so I'm just targeting this to you. redirecting this question to you, whether we should go for post-COVID-19 economic reforms based on current institutions, or need total restructuring of our economic system, having innovative and new institutions.
So India conventionally has done reforms only when severe crises have happened, right? In a democracy, otherwise very, very difficult to get reforms done. So clearly this is a crisis. And if the government is smart, and I have no reason to believe that the government is not smart, they will do their best to push through a fair amount of reforms which have been not done so far in the 6 years of this administration. The agriculture part has happened in the Prime Minister's speech. He had also mentioned land and labor. I would like to think that there will be some major initiatives in those areas. And in the medium term, I think those should lead to a lot of change and should fire up the economy all over again. In the near term, of course, we have to very quickly get used to the idea of the so-called new normal and try and bring the economy back on track. Right? Dr. Hota mentioned that JSPL is working at full capacity, so steel is probably one of the few that is still managing, and his company is one of the few in steel that is still managing to do that. Even in steel, otherwise, many companies are operating at 20, 30, 40%, especially the smaller one. And the last point I think is to, people say that what is going to happen? Nothing is going to happen. This is life. These things happen once in a while. You have a crisis like this. And clearly some people have suffered more, and part of that, one could argue, has been because of some lack of policy planning or enough of policy planning that should have been done. But events like this, it's very, very difficult to anticipate. You can always, have 2020 hindsight and say that this should have been done differently or that should have been done differently. But when you're actually in the hot seat making those decisions, you do the best that you can. And I think we are doing our best, and hopefully we are able to make the changes that are required.
Thank you very much. Of course, the questions were, this question was from Professor D.K. Burma from BRUS and many other people. So now there are questions which I have just made it a kind of theme out of the many questions for Professor Gerald. The most affected industry with COVID-19 are tourism and hospitality industries. Many countries like Thailand and Maldives, completely relying on these industries. How this industry will survive post-COVID-19?
That is a very, very serious. That sector is, I think, the one of the most hardly hit. I think the hotel, the airlines are very badly hit because of the COVID situation. And unless and until we have got proper medication and vaccination in place, I don't think international travel will be the same until middle of next year, at the soonest, I guess, And in Malaysia, we have seen many hotels and players folding up because they just can't sustain anymore, and the cash flow is not there anymore. So it's a very, very sad situation for the tourism sector. Yeah.
That's okay. Thank you very much. And the question for Dr. Hota, of course, the people like Raja Sarkar and others have asked this question. India is attempting to grab the opportunities provided by the companies who are contemplating leaving China as their manufacturing bases. How far do you think India is equipped enough to do the same?
See, India is a young, is the average age of India is quite young compared to other countries. So our fatality rate, as Dr. Arvind has said, that has been less because of one factor also, that our age average is very less. So what is required in this pandemic is always three things. Let me be very candid about it. One is the resilience, the response, and the agility. If you see all these three, both the resilience, agility, and response, in all three, the response of youth is very strong, for compared to the aged people. So if you see the innovations of India, the way India has fought the depression in 2008, before that, 2K syndrome, the kind of challenges which emerged in the year 2000, the IT solutions, India could become India could provide solutions to the world also. So India's response will be certainly much better. It's not that I'm telling because I'm an Indian, but because India's age, if you see the average age of India is quite young. That is number one. Number two is that India's evolution, if you see, from 1947 to this, when we are a basket economy, to 2019, hardly 72 years, where India was and where India is. So India has been responding, and the kind of Atmanirbhar package, I will conclude with this, that has been very welcoming, but there are few challenges. That challenges we have to answer, that these people who are working, are they coming back? If they are coming back, if they are not coming back, what is the thing that is waiting for there? Suppose you are opening the coal sector, we are opening the airport, whether that sort of skill is with those migrant laborers who are working in Surat in textile sector, they will come and work in the airport? No. Then what sort of the skilling has to be done? What sort of repackaging has to be done? Since we are better off, that I am telling you, since we are better, and since we have the ability, our traditional knowledge is very strong, be it in textiles, be it in furnitures. These are the new emerging markets. The herbal medicines, the organic pesticides. So our traditional knowledge is very strong. How to monetize this knowledge? How to increase the turnover? So these are the issues which India is far ahead of this, and I am sure India is going to be a global leader in this. About steel, let me tell you that China is producing 800 million ton. We are producing 100 million ton. In 2030, we will be producing 300 million ton. So with this kind of liberalization in the mining sector and the kind of knowledge, technical knowledge we have, the kind of young people's knowledge we have, we are able to. I am confident we are able to at least have 250 million ton. That the coal gasification process is coming, so no more will be dependent on anthracite coal. With our home coal, we can, with the thermal coal, we can make steels. So a lot of opportunities. There is no time to tell you, but I can only tell you there are a lot of opportunities. Shipping is one area we can do tremendous, because our plate mills which we are producing are really world class and the most widest part of this. So our own material will be used for shipping. So we can produce the thickest steel, and we can produce the thinnest steel for automobile sector. So how to, that I am telling, the challenge is how to become a cost leader and a quality leader, and how to repackage ourselves to the changed customers' need. The customer's appetite we have to map now and go ahead.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. In fact, you may be surprised to know that how many questions we have received. We have received, in my computer showing 228 questions. And what I have done, I have tried to find some themes out of it. And then I checked that some of the questions have been already answered when our learned panel members were deliberating. So therefore, it is just not possible within the time to answer to 228 questions individually. Therefore, my apologies, sincere apology to the people who have asked this question individually. I'm sure they have got the answers. Maybe fully, partly, but we have overstayed about 2 minutes, so I have to just to close the session here. But before I do that, before I thank all the members in the very distinguished panel, I would like to just share only maybe half minutes just to say that what I think that business in post-COVID era should do. I think business need to be very resilient in the future. And companies have to embrace their future far quicker than the world what they might have done organically. They have to move from agile working and digitization that we are talking about to automation and investment in renewables, that we have to do that. If you know where you are going, actions to respond to the crisis, perhaps today can set you up for the years ahead in a new normal, which Dr. Hota said there is no new normal but new norming. So in a kind of timely, in-depth political and economic scenario analysis is necessary for the outbreak and the potential paths to recovery, and particularly sustainability of the business. And individual economies in different countries, analysis of that is very critical, because every country, every geography has got a specific and characteristics and some kind of peculiarity. And I think business in the global scenario is to be seen in different forms. And planning, it is not a planning for future, but preparing for future, and preparing for uncertainties, preparing for the kind of VUCA world which we have been talking for last 10 or 15 years. And perhaps that VUCA has really come here, and we should be ready for any pandemic. So COVID has given us a lot of pains to us. I think the problems, we should find opportunities out of these problem situations. And that is what, with this note, that our efforts should be how to find opportunities out of the problem situation. And with this note, I have no words to express my gratitude and thanks to my panel members here. And they are very distinguished people. I am really, really grateful to you, because on a phone call, we have hardly spoken. With only exchange of message through WhatsApp, you have agreed. It is your greatness that and kindness that you have accepted. You are a very good friend, therefore you have accepted it and come and shared your thoughts with such a large audience. I wish everybody a safe life. I hope we will be out of lockdown, and even if we are in lockdown, we should continue to do business as JSPL is doing. And Professor Sahai is very liberal. I do not know, all countries should follow that. Let COVID exist with us, and we should run our business so that economy should not have recession, and cash flow should be there. We all are suffering from liquidity issues, so our bank should be, robust, and it is, and it should be strong enough to support us. Our business should be prosperous. With these notes, I thank each one of you and all the participants to whom I couldn't see. As a teacher, I always love to see my students in front of me, but looking at a small blinking camera, talking to everybody naturally is just not possible. So my apology for that, whether I have done justice to everybody or not, but with the paucity of time, because discussion like this can go on and we have to stop somewhere, because we are depending on a technology. So wish you all the best. Have a safe life and prosperous life. Thank you once again, everybody. Thank you. We missed Arun Misra. We missed Arun Misra because he is still continuing the board meeting. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Professor.
The life will continue, living will continue, appetite for a full-blown life continues. So best wishes to ourselves, best wishes for the Gen Next. Thank you all.
Right.
And namaskar.
Thank you very much. Professor Gerald, I am really grateful to you. I know how much I owe to you. So, Professor Sai, you are too kind, too really generous. I don't like to say it here. I really keep it here in my heart. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you very much. Good night.